taking years to write a book is so last century. Hi, I'm Liesl Hill. I help aspiring authors move toward their dreams of career authordom by mastering their story, mastering their words, and mastering their marketing. If you're ready to put your head down and do the work necessary to eventually live off your fiction royalties, then tune in each week. I'll give you actionable tips and hacks, as well as inspiring interviews with writers who are already doing this. We are prolific authors. Good morning, prolific authors. Today I'm going to be interviewing the wonderful Jeff Bacon, who has some really amazing writing insights. We had a really fun conversation, and I'm excited for you guys to hear it. Before we get to that, I want to remind you about our crime and mystery box set. If you want to support us, it is called DEAD, that is DEAD, which stands for Dark, Edgy, and Dangerous. It's really funny when we address each other in our Facebook group that we're all in for this box set. We're like, hello, dead authors, and it just sounds funny. We all have a good giggle about that. But because we're all crime writers, we actually, kind of like that, so it's kind of fun. Anyway, we are still looking to get sales, of course, on any platform, but especially Apple, so I will make sure and put that link in the show notes if you would like to support us. It's 99 cents for the pre-order, and you're going to get 18 different novellas from 18 different authors who are all very, very experienced and skilled authors. I also want to remind you that you can work with me if you're interested. I am a story clarity coach. I teach aspiring authors to streamline their craft, which is code for write faster and more efficiently, to up-level their writing and make sure that they are connecting with readers emotionally, and that they're telling page turners, bestsellers, that the readers will really connect deeply with their stories, and also to hone in on their marketing so they can reach the correct readers. So if you are needing help in any of those areas, I would invite you to jump on a 15-minute clarity call with me. It's a completely free call to you, and I don't really do any selling on these calls. It's just me and you talking about whether or not I could be helpful to you in your writing journey. If I can, great, then we will move forward from there. But if not, no big deal. So hop on a call with me. I still have a few slots left for before the end of the year, and you can go to calendly.com/theprolificauthor/clarity15. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but I will put it in the show notes if you're interested. And finally, make sure that whatever platform you are consuming this podcast on, make sure you hit subscribe. I've been working really hard the last few months, and I have a lot of really, actually very inspiring interviews coming up. Like some of the people I've talked to were just wonderful, and I'm really excited for you guys to hear them, and I don't want you to miss any of that. So make sure and hit subscribe. Okay, so now we are going to jump into the interview with Jeff Bacon. He is a fantasy author who lives in Wisconsin in the States. And yeah, he really knows his stuff, and he's got a lot of great insights and a lot of great advice for aspiring authors. So let's just hop into the interview. Hope you enjoy it.
Hi, prolific authors, me again. Are you on Pinterest? You really should be. Pinterest is its own search engine, and it has more than 2.5 billion active members, many of whom are on the platform weekly, if not daily. And guess what? A good chunk of those readers get on Pinterest to look for books, reviews, bookish communities, and all things fiction. Entrepreneur Stephanie Gass has created a training course that shows other entrepreneurs how to use Pinterest. Her tips can be adapted to any industry, including to us prolific authors. So if you want to learn how to use Pinterest to get extra visibility, be it for your books, your blog posts, or anything else you might create and want to find an audience for, this is for you. She'll even show you how to set it up so Pinterest works for you on autopilot, and you only have to monitor it for a few minutes a week. So don't miss Stephanie Gass's Pinterest Masterclass. Go to bit.ly/TPA Pinterest. TPA for the prolific author. So once again, that's bit.ly/TPA Pinterest. Why don't you start by introducing yourself and telling everybody who you are and what you write and that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, my name is Jeff Bacon. I am the host of the DIY Writer podcast. I'm also an author. I write dark fiction, urban fantasy, dark fantasy type stuff, some horror stuff, a little bit of grimdark, and every now and then I'll throw in a little bit of steampunk in some future projects here. I've actually been writing in the self-published market for about 3 years now. My first attempt at it crashed and burned and flamed out really, really fast. And it's like, oh, geez, I need to figure out what I'm doing here. You can't just post something to Amazon. I expect it to, hit James Patterson and Stephen King levels real fast. And so then I kind of regurgitated and relaunched and rebooted last year. with 3 rewritten books, and it's not been going too bad, except for this whole COVID shutdown, lockdown, can't write, can't do anything, kind of thing. But
Right, right.
besides that, I mean, it's been great.
So let me ask you then, I think it's funny that you say you expected to hit Stephen King levels. I think everybody does. Everybody expects to be J.K. Rowling with their first book. And so that's very, very common.
Not even J.K. Rowling was J.K. Rowling in her first book.
Right, exactly. So when you did it the first time and you said you crashed and burned, was it the same genres? Were you writing the same genres the first time as you did the second time? Okay.
Yeah. So what happened was, first thing you do is you try and find an editor. Well, I found a crappy editor, and I didn't realize you had to proofread it afterwards and everything else. Didn't actually realize that you had to write a story and not just a bunch of musings put into chapter form.
Right.
It was my first attempt at fiction, which I think, actually, I'm absolutely pretty sure that every author has a crappy first book.
Yeah.
Realistically. And then you start to figure things out, and then it's like, oh, and then you rewrite it, and then you redo it, and then you re-edit it, and, so on and so forth. And now I have a pretty decent process in place, but, as an author, I mean, I talk to lots of authors that have anywhere from 1 book to, 40 books out, and have been doing it for years and years and years. And everybody says the same thing. I could get better, and it's one of those things where I don't think you ever obtain perfection. You just always strive for it.
Yeah. And I agree. So do you want to tell us what your process is in general for getting your writing done?
Sure. I sit down and I write, and then I cut it up, and then I write it again.
Yeah.
And go through a few drafts, and then I'll send it off to a proofreader. This proofreader, she's also a beta reader, and so she'll give me all sorts of notes and say, this didn't make so much sense. Oh, dude, you're kind of going off the reservation over here, and give me some good feedback, and then I rewrite it again.
Yeah.
The reason I send it to a proofreader first is that when I send it to an editor, I want the editor to concentrate not have to concentrate as much on grammar and spelling and everything else, because if they get too caught up in that, they can't actually read the story.
Right.
And I like to get my editor involved in the story and give me some more feedback. And then once I get it back from the editor and we go back and forth a few times and they're like, okay, it's done, I'll send it off to my beta readers. And then they'll change it up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I wish you would have done this, or maybe, don't kill this guy. I never worry about not killing somebody, but,
well, given that you write horror, it's kind of baked in.
Somebody, it's usually the wrong character, and oh my God, I can't believe you killed him. Oh yeah, he's gone.
Yeah.
She had to go. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But, and then once I get those finishing touches put on, I'll send it yet to another editor, just so they get a fresh look at it. And so I have plenty of eyes on it before I actually publish it. So, and that's the way I do my short stories for the most part. Short stories, I don't think I take as much time in, but the novels I do.
Right. So how many drafts do you think you go through before you're ready to publish?
152. Just kidding.
I'm gonna say, you actually sit there and count them, huh?
Well, it's kind of like PTSD. It just kind of sticks in your brain, and you remember every horrible, painful part of it.
Right.
That's
just, yeah. I say, well, and to some extent, that's just being an author. We tend to remember the details, and being human, we tend to remember the bad stuff instead of the really good stuff. And so
I find it a little bit different, because I'll read it and I'll be like, did I really write that? Holy buckets, what was I thinking? That's wrong. But
yeah.
I go from a real kind of loose outline to just hitting the just hitting the action points, to actually filling it in and then changing it again. So then whatever I wrote in my outline, it's not even close to that by the time I'm done.
Really?
Send it off to proof. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's really interesting though, because it just shows but you do write an outline to start, so it sounds like.
I do, because everybody says it's the right thing to do, and then I probably use it for about 5 minutes and then go on to my my pantsing project.
Right. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of outlining, and I think one of the main reasons is that, like, one thing that I get a lot of pushback on is it's just something people think, and it's not really true, but they think that once they put it down in an outline that it's set in stone. And I always tell them that, no, you can change your outline anytime you want to change your outline. In fact, you should, once you figure out, that there's something better for your story. But I think sometimes an outline just helps you to get started, because we can be so paralyzed by not making a decision for our writing, so you just kind of have to use it to get started, and then you can change it up however you need to change it up.
I think what happens with me is that I write the outline and I put together a story.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time I get done writing it, the characters tell me that it has to end differently, or this has to happen in order for this for this event to happen. Here's the things that need to precede it. And it becomes kind of this psychotic little world that I build in my head where everybody's kind of talking to me at once.
Mm-hmm.
And it changes. But I look at the outline for parts of the first draft. I'd say I get through about half my outline and then I scrap it.
Yeah.
And then I go into, here's what my chapters are laid out as. And so I'll have a paragraph on every chapter of where it goes to. And then I go in and I fill in the details in the dialogue. I don't have any dialogue in my I don't know if you want to call it a rough draft of my outline or whatever. I don't actually add dialogue until probably my third pass.
Oh, okay.
And I'll start adding dialogue, and then scene setting. So it's just kind of putting layers on.
Yeah. So when you go through it first, you're just kind of putting down the action as it happens the first time?
I have to write out the story to make sure it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I do. It's got to be a good story, or else it just ends up in the archives to where maybe someday I'll write that story. But
right.
It's gotta make sense. It's got to be something that I could sit down in the bar with somebody and say, hey, I got a story for you, and be able to tell them and actually keep their interest for 40, 50 chapters.
Right. So I noticed that you said the characters tell you how it has to end. So do you think that you really flesh out your characters and their like personalities and things like that? Do you have that in your mind before you write, or do they come to you as you write?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, so I've got my main characters kind of fleshed out, and I do the old, kind of the psychological, this is what they are, this is what their tendencies are, and, really try and map it out. And then they change on me and they become, they almost become real.
Yeah.
And same thing with the secondary characters is, hey, you know what? I really should have a fluffy dress on for this, type thing. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. There are times when I'm writing, I'm actually answering questions out loud, and my daughter and my wife will come in. Who are you talking to? Nobody. Leave us alone.
That's great.
My psychiatrist thinks it's great.
Yeah. Well, writing is the only, see, how does it go? Writing is the only socially acceptable form of schizophrenia, right? Because we hear the voices, but, that's just who we are. It's not even a big deal.
Thank God I'm finally socially acceptable.
Right? Yeah, well, and that's interesting. I like that you said that you mapped out their tendencies. I've found with coaching clients that the people who, when you talk about characters jumping off a page or writing the scenes, for you, that people who don't map out the personalities to a certain extent first, they don't experience that. They just tell their characters what to say and the character says it. And these are the characters that are going to end up being really flat on the page, you know what I mean? Not having a whole lot of uniqueness. So I find that the people who have really unique character voices, it's because they've thought about that. They've thought about the tendencies. They thought about, and a lot of people don't do it even very consciously. They just kind of have it in their head and they don't even realize they're doing it,
Well, the thing of it is, if you don't understand who you're writing, how do you know when they get mad?
Right.
How do you know when something's going to set them off? And in order to make that nice little twist in a conversation, you have to understand that, this particular person may be triggered by something, that happened to him in the past. And you kind of have to understand his past before you can write what's going to happen to him in the book. So, maybe, in the back of your mind, he was, beat up as a child by his stepdad or something like that. And, he's walking down the supermarket. It's, just picking up groceries, just doing whatever. And he sees somebody, cuff a child. And all of a sudden it triggers him. And he takes a can of beans and bashes the guy's head. Sorry. I can write a lot better than I can talk, evidently. But,
that's true of me too. And I podcast. So I guess you podcast
yeah,
too.
I know.
Yeah.
Isn't that psychotic? But, we are gluttons for punishment.
We are.
But, and that triggers them to do something. And usually in my books, it's something, fairly violent that gets them in trouble or, whatever. But it's those triggers that you have to understand in order to write the scene. Otherwise, why is he acting the way he is? It's always got to do with their past. It's not a bad idea to write short stories based on their past.
Yeah.
Because if you write that short story, whether you publish it or not, or you can always publish it after you publish your series, but it gives you a dossier on your characters.
Right. Yeah, and you can actually, we'll get into marketing here in a minute, but you can repurpose that sort of thing. So that it helps you when you're writing, but then you can use it as a lead magnet, give it to your list, just as something extra, so. One
thing that I like to do is I like to write a short story on the villain.
Nice.
And so what I do is I write in first person.
Okay.
Everybody goes, oh my God, how do you do that? Just do it. Like I said, the voices are real, but in my genre, that's perfectly acceptable.
Right.
But the one thing that I do is I map out, okay, here's the villain's plan. Okay. So I map out the plan and I'll write a short story based on it. And I write it from the villain's perspective so that, at every turn, the hero is trying to fight him. And, I've got scenes in my mind where the villain's going, oh, that jerk, why the heck did he shut down this operation? Or why did he, how did he stop that guy? I don't understand. I had this thing perfectly planned,
right.
And it gives me insight to what the villain is actually going to, how he's going to react, how mad he's going to get, or what is he going to pull out of his arsenal now to, dehabilitate the hero,
Right.
So he's got his little fingers when I'm going to do this now, type thing, or, he's got the attitude that this should really stop him. And, of course, it's the girl's job not to be stopped, but.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really good practice. It helps the villain be the hero of his own story, which he needs to be. And I always say, I almost feel like most people, a lot of people do plan out their villains well, but they don't plan them out quite in as much detail as the hero. And that's probably because the hero tends to have more screen time, which I understand, but I almost feel like they need to plan out the hero or the villain even more than the hero, just because they're the ones driving the conflict. Without that, you're going to end up with a not so great story sometimes if you're not careful.
Again, it's about the twists and the reactions,
Right.
Again, if the villain all of a sudden sees something that triggers him, how do you know what triggers him?
Right.
Right. But I don't know.
Absolutely.
There are a lot better authors than I am out there doing a lot better job that probably don't go through all the same things, but it's all about the process you have to go through to get your book out.
Right. Well, and I'm a big proponent of doing things intentionally. So there's some people, like you said, that don't necessarily go through all of that because they just can hold it in their head, and that's great. But I also think, if you're going through and doing this, you're probably writing better than like 90% of the people uploading to Amazon, because most people just don't think about it. They write more like, what you said for your first book, just throw some chapters together and think it's going to be fabulous. But you need to be intentional about this kind of stuff, about planning your characters and planning your villains and knowing what pushes their buttons. And, that's just the way to make people connect with your story.
I think that comes from, you need to make the switch at some point in time as an author. There's learning to write in school. Then there's learning to write for entertainment. And then there's, you can do all this learning, but at some point in time, you got to stop learning and just write. and then
Right.
figure out what your fans like and what your voice is going to be and what your style is going to be, because your style is going to be, you may imitate some authors that you really like, but you're going to develop your own style.
Yeah.
And that's where all this has come from, is, spending, you read and you start liking things, and you dive into other authors, and you find out what you like, what you don't like, and then you start creating your craft. I honestly think that after 3-4 books, that's when you really start writing well.
I agree. It's when it all really kind of starts to click.
Start out with a pen name, and then make another pen name and do a really good job on your 5th book.
Yeah, for sure. And I know a lot of authors that do that. So yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about your different genres. I mean, the ones you mentioned are all related, but they're also kind of slightly different. I thought it was interesting that you said you wrote grimdark, because I've even been to writers' conferences where I talk about grimdark, and the majority of people don't know what that is. There's still a lot of people that don't know what grimdark is, because it's
What is grimdark?
It's niched down so far. So why don't you give us your definition of grimdark?
Grimdark is, where urban fantasy is kind of light and fluffy, vampire academies and
right.
everything else. Then you kind of dive into the dark fantasy where it gets grittier. Grimdark is everything's a moral gray area. Everything, it is, like your Witcher type stuff, to where your bad guy can actually be the hero, and he's just fighting, other bad guys, or, might not necessarily be deemed as the heroic type, or even take the hero's journey, but it's a very it's a darker, more violent type of genre than even dark fantasy.
Right.
So I think it steps it down, and that's my interpretation of it, and that's kind of what I look for when I'm reading grimdark. I'm looking for something that's just kind of brazenly violent, and with lots of with the details.
Right.
Not just he died, but how did he die, and
right.
how many quarts of blood were there, and was there, and everything else. But
right.
And what magical talisman was used.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I define it too. It's usually in terms of content, like you said, darker and more violent. And also even in, like I think Game of Thrones is very much straying into grimdark territory. And another thing that I see a lot, not always, of course, it's going to depend on the author, is being willing to have main characters be raped is sometimes a proponent, or what do you call that? Something that grimdark has. Whereas most others either shy away from that, or it's off the page. So it's just like a lot heavier, like you said, grittier issues to deal with in them,
Yep.
But yeah, it's just always interesting to me, because I'll go to, even writers' conferences where I just assume everybody knows what that is, and people will come up to me and be like, "What's grimdark?"
Well, the problem is you have your main genres. So you have science fiction and fiction, and then underneath that is fantasy, and then you have layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of different fantasy type thing, of different fantasy categories. And that's basically been developing because of the search engines.
Right.
And so they're trying to recategorize your books. And, we as authors have been flirting with different genres for quite some time. And so you may have a dark fantasy that flirts with horror, that also flirts with being a thriller, and so it can be in several different categories. And that's where well, okay, let's turn this into grimdark. So if somebody wants grimdark, this is where this fits in, because it's not really urban fantasy, dark fantasy, whatever. And so they're based on our creativity, they're trying to categorize us and put us into little boxes.
Yeah. And as far as I know, there's not a grimdark category right now on Amazon, but as the years go by and more of these kind of niched genres come out, the categories expand to have more and more. I know right now, I've seen a lot of authors that are frustrated because urban fantasy and paranormal fantasy are in the same category, and they really want those broken out, because they are niche readers, and not everybody likes all of that, but I'm sure eventually Amazon will end up breaking them out into their own categories.
Yeah, but again, Amazon's doing that not necessarily for the literary aspect. They're doing that for the sales aspect. So they'll break
Yeah.
it out any which way they can. But if you have a paranormal stuck in urban fantasy and it's selling well, they'll just go ahead and leave that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's more about the dollars. It's not about how
Yeah.
happy you make the readers by oh, whoops, they accidentally bought this book and never returned it. Oh well.
Yeah. That's very true. And that's something I think a lot of us writers struggle with, because even though obviously Amazon is a really great platform for us to reach readers and sell our work, yeah, Amazon's not so much in our corner as maybe it seems like they are. They're more in their own corner than they are in ours.
They are and they aren't.
Yeah.
I mean, their first their first mission is to sell.
Yes.
And
Always.
if they can sell you, then hey, you know what? You're a winner in their court.
Right. And so let me ask you this then, are you wide or are you exclusive?
I'm exclusive.
Are you? Yeah. And that works well for you?
It does. I have a fear of going wide.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason I do is because I make a good amount of money on KU.
Right.
And, everybody that's gone wide has said, oh my gosh, it's really good. Now I do plan on putting some audiobooks out that I'm going to record myself.
Oh, nice.
And I'm going to go wide with the audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be a good way of going.
Yeah.
But as far as the ebooks go, I can't, every time I think, oh boy, now it's time to go wide. Let's put this out there in Kobo and let's get, Smashwords and Draft a Digital and let's get it all out there, That's when all of a sudden I have a really good KU day and I'm like, ooh, I don't want to get rid of that.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm always kind of stuck in that, but I think at some point in time, when it dies down on Amazon, then I'll probably, take them out of KU and put them wide and see if I can't do another re-release. But I really want to wait till I have more books out before I do that.
Yeah. And
I think that's, we were going to talk a little bit about marketing, but I think that's an important thing to remember is that it's based on the volume of books that you have out.
Right.
For most authors, every now and then you hear about somebody, oh, I had one book that sold, 1 million copies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That happens infrequently, few and far between.
Right.
That is literally lightning striking. Or else you spent a lot of money on marketing. But most authors, realistically, when you want to start making, when you look at making a good living on authoring, somehow, some way, whether it's under multiple pen names or whatever, 20 books seems to be about the level that you want to be at. Once you have 20 books out there, your previous stuff starts getting read. Things start happening for you.
Yeah.
Even between 6 and 12 books, you start seeing things kind of steadily go up and measure up as far as incomes go. So, I mean, it's really about, putting out the material.
Right. So about how many books do you write in a year?
In 2020, 0.
Really? Because of I'm just curious because people are probably listening and wondering, if it takes 20 books, like people are always going to be projecting and trying to figure out how many books they need to write a year, how long it's going to take them to get to 20 books. And of course, that's going to depend on the writer, but
depends on what your process is. If you're going to write to market and you have everything laid out and you can lay out, 5,000-10,000 words a day, you can put out books pretty fast. I've got a friend that he puts out, he just for 4 months, he just chucks out the books. Okay. And he's getting them to the editor and he just kind of stockpiles them. And then he starts his releasing. He releases every 4 weeks, until and during that time he's promoting and everything else. And then he has this dead period again where he just writes and writes and writes and writes and writes. And he throws out another 6 to 8 books, And it's taken him a few years to get to be, to be a full-time author, but he's doing really well.
Right.
Hi, prolific authors. Me again. All authors know the best investment they can make in their writing career, other than doing the actual writing, of course, is to build their author email list. Like many of you, I started small, using the cheapest, most common provider I could find. But things have changed in recent years. The go-to email providers authors used to use simply aren't supporting us as well as they used to. That's why I use ConvertKit. Its functionality is off the charts amazing. Deliverability is stellar, and in all the time I've used ConvertKit, I've never had problems with getting emails to my list exactly when I wanted to. ConvertKit allows you to put everything on autopilot, so you can connect with your fans in the way you want to, but without sacrificing valuable writing time to do it. With a totally free plan to get you started and comparable pricing as your list increases, there's something for everyone. So invest in yourself now by going with an email provider that will grow with you. Visit bit.ly/TPA email. TPA as in the prolific author. So once again, that's bit.ly/TPA email. Because we are prolific authors, and prolific authors have stellar email lists.
That rapid releasing probably sustains him through the period when he's writing and not releasing.
Right. I know another person who actually I just Catherine Hudson. I just interviewed her. Her podcast coming out here in a little bit, and she writes 18,000 words a day.
Wow.
And does it well.
Yeah.
And she is stockpiling books and she's putting them out, and she also ghostwrites for people and if you can put out that kind of volume, you can do very well. If you're the type of person that's going to put out 3,000 words a day, it's going to be much slower, but it really depends on what your process is.
Right.
It also depends what genre you're in. I mean, if you're epic fantasy, you need to plan on probably somewhere between 80 and 120,000 words that you're going to stick out there. You have to do that world building and all that kind of stuff. If you're doing like an urban fantasy, dark fantasy type thing, 50 to 60,000 words, it's about right. And you can put out books much faster. Right. If you're going to do flash fiction, or else you're just going to put out novellas, you can do that too. As long as, I know a lot of people that put out series, episodic type novels that are only 25,000 words, and they can crank those, they crank them out every 4 weeks.
Right.
And they've always got a new release out there, but it's episodic so that, it gives readers enough time to read that book and then want the next one. And then they, they shovel out the next one and, they make good money. It all depends on what you're doing and what your genre is.
Right. So you have to do your due diligence on the genre and figure out how to make it work for you. What would you tell people who are struggling to get their words written every day? There's plenty of people who think it's not possible to do, however many, 5,000, 10,000, 18,000 words a day because they're not doing it and they just can't even wrap their head around it. And I think it's just really a matter of training your brain to do it. So what advice would you give people who are struggling to actually, get their butt in the seat and write the words?
Start with sprints.
Yep.
Start with a sprint. Do a 15-minute sprint and just write.
Yeah.
Do a 10-minute sprint, whatever you can, just write. And, don't care if it's good, bad, or, whatever it is, just write. Don't worry about the words. Don't worry about the sentences actually making any sense. Just write.
Yeah.
And then once you hit once you hit 60 words per minute, 70 words per minute, and, it's like, okay, then extend the time, and make it a habit that every day, every single day, you're going to sit down, you're going to write something. So you could do like a 2-3 hour block of writing and only get 300 words done. But if you practice sprints, you will find that you create something and you can create it efficiently after time.
Right.
After the time has passed. And so it really comes down to just doing these writing sprints and being able to just, whatever you need to do, just focus on your writing for that moment, whether it's shutting everything off, whether it's listening to music or whatever it is that your thing is, and don't let anybody tell you, oh my God, you must do this. It's your process. You love it.
Right.
Right. You do what works for you.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk about marketing then a little bit more. So What did you do differently the second time when you were more successful than you did the first time? I mean, obviously, writing a better book is always going to be your best marketing, but what else did you do specifically to market your books? And do you still do?
The first thing I would say is don't worry about marketing your first book.
Right.
When you put it out there, don't spend any money on ads, or don't think that you're going to be spending, $100, $200 on Amazon ads or Facebook ads and going to make any kind of a splash.
Right.
I mean, honestly, if you're going to spend money on marketing, get a MailChimp or a MailerLite account and get email addresses. Build up your mailing list. Release 2 or 3 books. If a series is the best way to do this, but get 2 or 3 books out there and then start worrying about marketing your book. But the whole time, be creating your digital footprint and be creating that email list, because that will serve you much better than any other medium of advertising. As things progress, and this is the way it's always been for years and years and years of marketing, platforms come up and they're really cheap to advertise on. Okay, Google Ads is probably the latest. Facebook's kind of getting that way too, but Google Ads, everybody was advertising, and it cost you 2 or 3 cents to throw that advertisement out, and people were building businesses on this type of stuff. Where they just throw out an advertisement and boom, look, instant business. I'm making cash on the internet.
Right.
Lots of get rich quick schemes and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. What happened was Google decided that, 80% of our time is supporting these smaller advertisers, and they're only about 15% of our profit. But if we change things around so that the major advertisers and the people that actually have millions of dollars to spend on advertising, which is, a big chunk of where we're making our money on Google Ads, if we focus on those guys and forget about the little guys and make it almost too expensive for them to advertise, we'll make more money with less effort. And that's what happened. And you saw overnight a whole bunch of internet businesses just kind of come crashing down, and they had to find different methods. We had Facebook come out with their advertising platform, and their, the way you can target people in Facebook is second to none. But you also see that, the auctioning and the bidding is starting to, get up there to where, you're going to probably see the same thing happen there as you have with Google. So if you're relying on Facebook, at some point in time, expect that revenue stream to be cut off. Right. Amazon ads, it's getting more and more expensive. You notice, I don't know if you run Amazon ads or not, but the daily email I get from them saying, you should increase your budget because you get much more impressions if you did this. It's like, no, that's what my daily budget is. Sorry. Right. I still want to make a profit on my book. I don't want to all of a sudden turn up with $1,000 Amazon ad bill. But they're trying to crank up the advertising because it's easy money for them. Right. Yeah. To where at some point in time, it's going to be the mainstay authors, and the bigger authors that are the only ones that are going to be able to afford advertising. So, that may happen, that may not happen. But no matter what, you have this email list of people that are actually interested in your book. Right. You always can advertise to them. No matter who changes what, that email address is yours. Right. So let me ask you this. I haven't run Amazon ads the last few months, but I've been really inundating myself with Facebook ads know-how, and not necessarily from an author standpoint, but from more of a general entrepreneurial standpoint. And it's kind of made me realize that there's a lot of things that just simply aren't really taught very much in the author community. And of course, it's a little different because books are such small ticket items, so we have to take that into account. But let me ask you this. How do you go about advertising to your list? Like, how often do you ask them to buy your books and that sort of thing? In my newsletters?
Yeah, to your email list.
I don't really, obviously you build up excitement by telling them, hey, this book's going to be coming out. When you actually have a launch date, you tell them what the launch date is. I never really ask them to buy a book. I just tell them what's going on. Yeah. That email is a conversation between me and you. You know, I want that to be a little more intimate than I don't want it to be an infomercial all the time.
Right, right.
You know, I want to tell them what's going on, what's happening. I'll promote somebody else's book saying, hey, this just came out. You know, it looks awesome. You should read this. You know, it's kind of close to my genre. It's a friend of mine or whatever, you know, or you do a newsletter swap or whatever. But,
Right.
you know, I really try and make it so that the newsletters at least get some sort of interaction with the reader. Now I'm really bad at, I've got two different mailing lists. I've got one that I'm really active on. And then I have one that I do probably once a month.
Yeah.
Depending on what the series is.
Are those for different genres?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the one that I do that I'm interactive with once a month, I still get a good open rate.
Yeah.
But you know, it's more of a, hey, how you doing? You know, this is what's going on. You know, it's been a lot of, you know, well, this is kind of how COVID's been affecting my family. You know, how are you doing? You know, type thing. And it's been just kind of a, you know, whatever while I wait for the next release of my my Dark Side of Good series. You know, but and I have a reader group that's, you know, again, you know, we just joke around a little bit and everything else, and yep, still writing, you know, type thing. But the other one, which is a different genre underneath a different name, I'm more active with, because every time I send out an email, I get more buys. You know, I get more sales, and so that one actually produces a good amount of money. I talked to one gentleman overseas that he runs mailing lists all the time, and every time he sends out an email with a new release, it's $10,000. Well,
wow.
I want to get there.
Right,
you know?
right.
And so
I think, and the reason I asked is because I think, you know, what you were saying about advertising changing and that revenue might get cut off at some point. I think we're going to have to, the ones who are really successful are going to have to switch almost entirely to email marketing. And that just means you just got to grow your list, you know, and that way you can tell them, and that's what'll happen. Like you said, you have enough people on there to make $10,000 or whatever every time you put out a book, you know.
Right.
I really think it's going to be going more toward that than what it is now.
I think what's going to happen is, you know, a friend of mine calls it digital sharecropping. You know, and that's, you know, Amazon ads versus, you know, ads on BookBub or Goodreads or, you know, Facebook, whatever you're doing, you're basically sharing that space with all the other authors who are trying to,
right.
You know, the one thing I would say, BookBub probably has the second best, I probably third best targeting methods. You know, because you can actually pick the authors and the books that you want to target, saying, okay, if you read this, you should probably read my book.
Right.
You know, type thing. Facebook, again, I think has the best targeting.
Yeah.
All around. But, you know, I think people get lost in that. You know, I think they use the, I don't think authors are, yeah, I think they'll boost a post instead of actually creating ad content. And I think they'll use the just the interface that comes from with the Facebook page versus actually going into the business page and actually, you know, drilling down to the targeting and running analytics on how the ad's doing. I don't see a ton of authors using pixels, and pixels are the coolest thing in the world.
Right.
Use them.
Well, that's what I meant when I said I started looking into this, and there's so many things that I just don't see being taught, or at least not taught well in the author community. And a lot of authors, they just don't know about them. So they're running ads that really are not very profitable, you know?
You know, I mean, you know, posting videos and boosting those and using the video watches to actually target marketed, you know, target people that might be interested in your genre, or lookalike audiences are really strong. And any combination you can think of thereof to target anybody in any group or any kind of classification that you want to is really, you know, kind of a cool thing.
It is.
You know, without giving away too much.
So which ads do you use predominantly, or do you use a combination of them?
Which what? I'm sorry.
Which ads? Do you do a lot of Facebook or a lot of book club, or how do you use them?
If you're talking about books, I do probably 50% Amazon.
Okay.
The rest of it will be Facebook.
Yeah.
BookBub, I'll do every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
I never get a real good feeling or a real good, unless you're going to get a BookBub deal, that I don't really think it pays off all that well unless you're wide.
Right. That's true. BookBub likes wide better.
Yeah. If you're, if you're going to be in KU and you're going to be, all your ebooks are going to be on Amazon, BookBub, it's a good place to build followers because they get an email every time that you throw out a book. But beyond that, I don't think the advertising is all that great because you have probably 40 or 50% of their audiences, looked at, Google Books or Kobo or iBooks or, whatever for their reading. And if you're not on there, you're advertising to people that just aren't ever going to buy your book on Amazon.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I asked you something else and I just lost my train of thought.
That's against all podcast rules, by the way.
I got it. It just took me a minute. So let me ask you this. I do Amazon ads, but I also have 3 really completely different genres. So I have to test keywords for every single one. And that slows me down a lot. So how long did you find that it took you to, figure out good keywords on Amazon that worked for you, like to test and everything?
Well, I mean, how do you test them?
How do I test them, or how does anybody test them?
No, how do you test them?
How do I test them? I scrape keywords various ways, and then I kind of use Brian Cohen's method of just putting them up there at a small, like a reasonable bid, 25 to 35 cents. And then I just watch them over time, and the ones that convert, I can put them into a super ad and, crank up the spend, that sort of thing. But it takes time and it takes a little bit of money. And so, there are times that can slow you down. How about you? How do you test yours?
I do basically the same thing.
Okay.
I use Brian Cohen's method for the Amazon ads. The other thing I'll do is I look at SEO statistics for the on SEMrush for certain keywords, depending on, because I want to be found on Google also. And
so that just tells you how many searches, that sort of thing, is done for that keyword.
Yeah, whether or not it's going to be good. I kind of use Publisher Rocket also just to see what what their ranking is, and then I'll look at a K-Lytics report, and that's how I kind of come up with them, and then I test them using $5 ads at a nickel a piece for every keyword.
Okay.
Some of them, if they actually are turning over a revenue and I can prove that they're profitable, I'll up the bid on them a little bit. Some of them that just don't get any resonance at a nickel a piece, I may raise them if I think they're a good keyword, or I may just get rid of them.
Yeah.
The problem is that you're bidding against all the authors, and they're using the same keywords, and somebody's coming in bidding 30, 40 cents on it. Okay, I only make so much money per book. Why am I going to spend, a huge percentage of my profits on advertising this one keyword that 100 other authors are using? And why would I get into a bidding war? So I go low. I go really low on my keyword research, and then the ones that resonate are the ones that I'll scrape up and I'll put in my I organize my ads in Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4, and Final. And so I'll move the keywords from Gen 1 is where I do my research. Gen 2 is where I kind of work on my script, on my ad scripts, whatever I write, and does this resonate? And that's where I do my A/B testing on the actual ads and the graphics. Gen 3 is something that I'm making money on. And then if it's something that's continually looks like it's producing, I'll put it into Gen 4 if I want to do more testing, or my Final, and then I just let it run until it dies.
Okay.
Yeah. So I typically have 40, 50 ads running.
Nice.
Between all
but
of
just
them.
all really low, or at least the Purely ones that really well spend.
Yeah, because again, the whole game is to make profit, not to lose money on a book. So I mean,
Right.
if my total ad spend doesn't break even or make me a little bit of profit, then why am I advertising?
Right. Which comes back to what we talked about at the beginning of having at least 3 books, because otherwise you're just going to end up spending more than you're bringing in.
Right. Right. The same thing with Facebook. Realistically, you can mess around with ads a little bit just to get a feel for it and spend a little money on your education, but 3-4 books and then start advertising towards, if it's a series, always advertise book 1,
Right.
or advertise and pointing towards the series page, but because some people just buy the whole series.
Yeah.
But which
and
is
that's actually
picked up from an interview. It's like, oh yeah, that works.
Yeah, I've known that a little bit, and for anybody who does go wide on BookBub, actually that works really well on BookBub. So
Yeah.
At least for the Amazon link, you can advertise the series page.
It seems to me that the people that go wide have less advertising on Amazon and more advertising on Facebook and BookBub and those other types of places. The people that are tied to KU, they will predominantly advertise on Amazon.
On Amazon, yeah. I'm just starting to take my books wide. I have exactly 1 series that I've taken wide so far, very, very recently. So I haven't, I don't really have anything to say one way or the other about how well it's worked. But I was told too that you probably shouldn't go wide until you have the budget to get advertising on different platforms. Do a Kobo promo 1 week or 1 month, 1 week, and then do like a Nook promo the next month, and that's kind of how you'll build your wide. But it's so it kind of goes back to the same thing. If you've got 1 book and no budget, it really probably is best to stay in KU until you've grown as an author to the point where you can sustain it as a business model.
There's a lot of people that I know that they've got 15, 20 books out, and they'll go into Amazon and KDU and do their soft launch there. And then they'll do it for 90 or 180 days.
Right.
And once they have all the tweaks done, you get that one review that says, hey, you screwed this up on chapter 3. Oh yeah. You can change it real quick and everything else, and then go wide.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with test releasing and then going wide.
Yeah, I've heard that. And I was thinking I might start doing that too. If I want to take my books wide, I think that's a really good process to have, so that you can kind of hit all the audiences at least once,
Yeah. The thing that always, like I said, always stops me is that, that KU check is really nice.
It is. It definitely is. But it also depends on genre to a certain extent, because some genres do better in KU than others do.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like, I know that like romance does well there, so I don't have any judgment at all for romance authors, because they make all their money in KU, and that's a lot of money, for that genre. But there's plenty of genres that go into KU and they just don't do as well in KU. So if that's the case, why not take them wide,
And it's absolutely a case by case basis. As an author, you're running a business and you want to make money. That's,
right.
There's very few of us that are out there just to spread our art.
Yeah.
It's at least break even, for God's sake.
Right.
So I mean, it all depends on what you're doing. If you got something in KU and it's continually kicking you out checks, then stick with that. If you know it well, it's an easy platform to just get into and publish and just have all sorts of fun with. If you aren't doing all that well, then leave it on Amazon, but take it out of KU, publish yourself to Kobo and Barnes and Noble, and then the rest of it go into Publish Drive or Draft to Digital, and let them publish you to the rest of it. And then you only have 3 or 4 portals to screw around with.
Right.
And you can advertise anyway. You can do Google ads if you want. I wouldn't, but
right.
whatever. But that's where your Facebook ads can be more effective, because you can go further out than just in the US or whatever your territory happens to be, and the thing with Amazon, you have to kind of worry about the markets, and they don't have a real big standing in Canada, whereas Kobo is a Canadian company, and you're going to sell books in Canada if you go with Kobo, but.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, we're kind of running out of time, but one thing we didn't talk about too is selling off your website. And like we talked about, as the marketing gets harder on Facebook and Amazon and platforms we don't own, I think we're going to see more authors needing to sell from their website, which is a problem with the exclusivity, so it's.
Well, yeah, it is. The one thing that I see happening is I think nonfiction has a lot better chance of selling off their website than fiction. I think fiction is always going to need the bookstore, the portal, just because there's so many of us, and you're going to have that backup of a bookstore, of an online bookstore. Yeah. But, I may be wrong.
No, I think you're right. At least in terms of finding readers that are cold readers, I think selling off your book or your website will be more something geared toward your list, who already knows who you are and doesn't mind hopping over to your website and buying your book, But in terms of finding new readers, I think you're right. There kind of does have to be a bookstore portal. I agree with that.
Now, if you want to do lead magnets and stuff from your website, then that works out the best. But I think actually selling, because everybody wants to buy something, and then you have that every now and then you have somebody return it because they hated it, fairly quickly, or the borrows, or anything like that, to where the online bookstores probably do a better job than we can managing that ourselves.
Right. Yeah. Yep, I think so. Well, as a final question, what advice would you give to writers who are just trying to get started and get into the business?
Right.
Yeah.
Just right.
Just right.
Don't worry about the marketing until you have an inventory of books. Don't worry about making a big splash. Don't worry about anything. Just write. Try and get 1 million words written before you start worrying about spending any money on advertising.
Yeah, I like that as a threshold. Figure out 1 million words, and it's just getting 1 or 2 or 3 books under your belt is going to teach you more than anything else will.
The other thing I would say too is do not forget about short stories. Do short stories. Throw them out on your blog. Throw them out on your website. Do whatever you have to do. Get them published in anthologies. There's 1 billion anthologies out there looking for short stories. That's a good way to get your name out there and get involved in other author groups. Right. Is being in these short story anthologies, whatever genre you happen to be in. Enter some contests if you want, or whatever, but short stories count towards that word count. And they will help you formulate how quickly you have to get to the point as far as writing. They're a great exercise, whether it's flash fiction or whether it's just, your normal 6,000 word short story that you want to throw out there just for fun. But
yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm somebody who's really long-winded in my writing. So writing short stories definitely helps me to not be too flowery in the writing. So yeah, I think that's a really good exercise for new authors. Very good. Very good piece of advice. All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to us. It was really, really fun. And it was great to get to know you.
Yeah, you too. Sounds like you should be on my podcast one of these days.
Yeah. Hey, maybe.
Hey.
You never know.
Never know.
And there you have it. I thought Jeff gave us some real gems there, and I hope that you guys were able to take some good advice away from that and really implement it in your own writing career. Before you go, remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening. And if you would be so kind as to give me a review, that helps the algorithm pick up the podcast and show it to other people so that more people can get in on this advice as well, who are also making their way through this crazy writing journey that we're all part of. So if you could help me out by leaving a review on whichever platform you're listening on, I would really, really appreciate it. And if you're interested, don't forget to hop over to calendly.com/thecareerauthor/clarity15 to hop on a call with me. I do get booked out pretty quickly, so make sure to act fast. All right, everyone have a great week of writing, and I will see you next week. Bye.
Me again. Before you go, if you found value in this episode, I would love it if you could leave me a review. Reviews are the best way to show your appreciation and help others find this podcast. Be sure to screenshot it, share it on your favorite social media network, and tag me at LK Hill Books. Remember, the world needs your stories. Only you can change someone's heart with your fire-breathing dragons, your mind-blowing mysteries, your epic romances, and your intense thrillers. So join the revolution and be a prolific author.